Did you ever live in a neighborhood with an abandoned building with a questionable history which is shrouded in mystery? If you're into urban exploration, coming across such a site would be a jackpot. But even the most ardent urban explorers will be drooling over these incredible abandoned spots we have in store today. Discover the strangest abandoned places that really exist, and some of them you can actually explore. Don't forget to smash the like button, subscribe, and click the notification bell for more such amazing content. Let's get to it. Rugyong Hotel. North Korea has a lot of abandoned buildings which are built for the sole purpose of propaganda and to give a false sense of economic prosperity. But there is one particular building in the whole country that takes the cake when it comes to this category. The Rugyong Hotel in Pyongyang, or also known as the Hotel of Doom, has never hosted a single guest since its existence. Interestingly, the hotel holds the title for the tallest unoccupied building in the world, with the structure peaking at 1,080 feet. That's not all. This abandoned hotel is also the tallest building in the entire country and is visible for miles from the countryside. The only purpose that it seems to fulfill is for showcasing propaganda light shows being displayed on the facade of the building. The Rugyong Hotel began construction in 1987 and is still under construction. The work on the building often gets interrupted depending on the economic situation in North Korea. The latest upgrade was the installation of glass panels across the building in 2008. The very top of the tower was supposed to house a revolving restaurant, although it seems unlikely that it's being used like the rest of the building. Seems like such a waste of money and potential. China's Atlantis. Though the lost city of Atlantis has never been found, there is a close substitute for those who wish to experience something similar. The flooded city of Xizang in China is often called the Atlantis of the East, and you can see why. This mysterious time capsule of a city captures the culture and architecture during Imperial China, with influences from the Ming and Qing dynasty, who ruled between 1368 to 1912. But what makes this city a bit different from the city of Atlantis is the fact that it was never lost. In fact, the city was thriving and alive until the late 1950s, but when the Chinese government started to build a dam, around 300,000 inhabitants of this city were given the boot and were relocated elsewhere. Once the dam was up, the city was flooded to a height of 120 feet with water. The city remained forgotten until 2001 when the government sent out an expedition to check on the forgotten city of Xizang. To their surprise, the city was still in great condition. Since then, the interest for the Atlantis of the East has been increasing, and many new expeditions are undertaken as well. Ironically, the city probably would have never had the same publicity if it wasn't flooded, so maybe it worked out well for them. Abandoned Dominos sugar refinery. Moving from lost ancient cities to something more contemporary, the abandoned Dominos sugar refinery in Brooklyn's Williamsburg neighborhood would catch the eye of any urban explorer. This 150-year-old structure was part of the American history during its time. At its peak, the refinery had employed 4,500 employees and was capable of processing 4 million pounds of sugar in a single day. But that was a long time ago. The machines at the refinery stopped in 2004 and its employees have since been let go. Except for the main refinery, everything else was demolished in 2014. Sadly, urban explorers will have to skip this one, since there isn't much to explore here but a scrapyard of all the demolished structures. Sansei Houses. These futuristic-looking homes were intended to serve as a vacation resort for US servicemen posted in East Asia. The Sansei Houses, or more commonly known as the UFO Houses, were designed by Matti Suuranen, a Finnish architect. The construction started in 1978, but unfortunately the original plan for this property never came to fruition since the project was marred by bizarre incidents since the beginning. While building the Sansei Houses, many of the workers perished in strange car and freak accidents. People started attributing these incidents to supernatural causes. One theory was that the property was constructed over a Dutch burial ground of 20,000 soldiers. Another theory claims that the site was cursed after a dragon statue in the area was destroyed during its construction. Ultimately, with all these strange happenings, the Sansei project was eventually abandoned in 1980. For 30 years, it remained a ghost town until its complete demolition in 2010. Oddly, this site is now being converted into a water park. Hopefully, nothing freaky happens here again. Abandoned USSR Navy Computing Center. The former Soviet Union is an urban exploration haven. After the USSR fell, most of the provinces lost their funding and a major part of the economy came to a standstill. As a result, Russia is filled with abandoned Soviet-era buildings which once had purpose but now remain at the mercy of Mother Nature. This abandoned computing and analytical center for the USSR Navy just outside Moscow is one such building. Sadly, the equipment brought into the project was already outdated at the time of its construction in 1986. That, coupled with the eventual collapse of the USSR in 1991, led to the ultimate demise and abandonment of this project. What you're left with are these massive buildings which are mere shells of their true purpose. Petrova Gora. When wars are fought, you often are left with remnants of pain and suffering of a generation of people. In order to commemorate and immortalize this sentiment, countries or governments often erect memorials. The Petrova Gora is a similar monument built in honor of the Croatian victims of World War II. You might be wondering why the memorial looks so dilapidated. Well, it wasn't built this way when architect Vojin Bakic constructed the site in 1981. Over the years, locals approached the memorials as not a site to pay their respects, but as a source of scrap metal and scavenged most of the building. Though the structure still remains, it is not in its former glory. The monument stands on top of Veliki Petrovac, the highest peak of Petrova Gora, which is a mountain range in Croatia. Interestingly, beneath the structure there's a network of tunnels and rooms used as a field hospital during World War II, and then later by Yugoslavian communists as a meeting point. It's a fascinating place. Treehouse in Taiwan. If there's one common thing about most abandoned buildings, it's that nature will always prevail and take over. Remember the movie I Am Legend? You see the entire Times Square in New York being taken over by foliage and essentially turning it into a prairie. Something of a similar sight can be seen in Tainan, Taiwan as well. The Anping treehouse may look like an interesting treehouse in the beginning, but it wasn't always the case. The Anping building used to be a brick-and-mortar warehouse built in the 19th century for storing goods before being loaded into transport ships. Once the warehouse was abandoned, the neighboring banyan tree took over it completely. With time, the entire building was overgrown with the branches and roots of the tree. What remains now are rubble held together by the roots, occupying the shape of the former warehouse. It's almost like a living fossil of an old building. Al-Wukair Scrapyard. What's this strange place in the middle of the desert? Vehicles of all kinds, from excavators to cranes and motorbikes to cars, all of them seem to be coated in a thick layer of white sand and dust. From the looks of it, it seems like your average scrapyard, and in some respects it is so. The Al-Wukair scrapyard in the desert of Qatar, and 12 miles from the city of Doha, is unlike any other scrapyard. If you notice, most of the vehicles here are in excellent condition except for the dust coating. So why on earth is there a collection of vehicles which hasn't been scrapped yet for parts? Well, you can call this place a sort of purgatory for seized vehicles for people who've committed misdemeanors. Though they might not be scrapped, once a year an auction is held for the best vehicles in the lot and sold to the highest bidder. Actually, not a bad way to get rid of these seized vehicles. St. Nicholas Fortress. And lastly, we head back to Croatia once again to this interesting-looking fortress at the mouth of St. Anthony's Chapel in Šibenik on the Adriatic coast. The St. Nicholas Fortress was famous for being an impregnable fortress during its period of service, which was an impressive 400 years. It was built by the Venetians in the 16th century as a defense against Turkish boats landing on the port. It was manned with 32 cannons, but its intimidating structure was an even bigger threat to the enemy. Over the centuries, the fortress served different armies and also saw various renovations, keeping with the times and eventually being abandoned by the military in 1979. Even today, the structure looks so imposing and scary against the backdrop of the Adriatic Sea. No wonder the fortress lasted so long. Cloud chamber for the trees and sky. When you see it for the first time, this wonderful earthly abode looks like a hobbit home, straight out of fairy tales or sci-fi movies, but not quite so. This chamber was built by a British artist named Chris Drury, where the abode was supposed to work as a rustic camera obscura. When the doors of the cloud chamber are closed, the light passes in the house through a tiny hole in the roof, and this is when the camera obscura effect comes in. It is an impeccable ancient trick that projects the mirror image of the outside world on the walls of the house. You can get a beautiful insight of the clouds, trees, and also the blue sky while you're gazing at them from the inside. The difference is just that the images are upside down. Don't you think this is absolutely amazing? Let us know in the comments below. Bat Tower. The next abandoned place on this list is called the Bat Tower. No, it's not the residential place of Batman. This unusual construction was built in 1929 by a real estate developer named Richter Clyde Perky, who also owned a fishing line at the lower Sugarloaf Quay. But the area was infested with a lot of mosquitoes and Perky wanted to do something about it since it irked his guests at the fishing lodge. Apparently, he had heard that bats prey on mosquitoes, so he constructed the bat tower to attract bats and give them a place where they can also feed on the mosquitoes. But unfortunately, not a single bat moved in since there were no bat colonies around the area until 1996. Although Perky should have done his research, the architecture of it is pretty interesting, isn't it? UFO Home. Are you a fanatic of the UFOs? Do you gaze at the stars and think that we're definitely not alone in this universe? Then this mushroom house or alien house in Homestead, Florida will definitely pique your interest. There's an intriguing mystery when it comes to the origin of the structure. No one actually knows as to who built it or why they opted for this unusual design. But it's been noted that the building was constructed without any planning permission from the local authorities. Since 2013, the building has been marked for demolition, but even after so many years, the structure still remains. There are a lot of stories going around with regards to the owners of the place, where some say that the place was inhabited by gangsters. The earlier pictures of the house are seen from 1974, where futuristic home designs were popular in this part of America, but this UFO home is completely amusing and out of the blue. Fairy Village. Did your bedtime stories comprise of listening to fairies and dwarves? Then you'll be all ears to know about this abandoned fairy village in Connecticut, and its site is nothing but jaw-dropping. Although the village is in ruins now, it stands in full view of a ginormous interstate highway, but no one actually knows that it's there. The village has tiny houses that have been carved to the side of a stone cliff. It once had an ornamental garden, but the flora and fauna took over the entire village. The local area has its own myths about the village, where they stated that the village was constructed by a woman who claimed that fairies in her garden were driving her crazy, so she built them a place to live. But it's more likely that the place is a roadside attraction for people to visit. So if you're thinking of visiting, make sure to exercise a little caution, since the area has poison ivy in its flora. Who knows, you might actually find a fairy. Igloo Shelters. There was a time when the Black Hills Ordnance Depot in South Dakota, about 8 miles south from the town of Edgmont, USA, was an important storage and maintenance facility for the United States Army Ordnance Corps. It was constructed in 1942 because of the increase in demand placed on ordnance by the country's active participation in World War II. Since the facility stands on a remote location, most of the people who worked there had to be stationed nearby. It's for this reason that a residential facility known as Igloo was constructed as abodes. Although the shelters look like basic concrete blocks, on the inside you'll be surprised to find a church, a hospital, a post office, a swimming pool and a theatre. The place actually has all the amenities to work like a proper town, but the area has more to its past. Post-World War I, the area was used as a testing site for many chemical weapons like mustard gas and sarin. By mid-1960s, the site was of no use and it was abandoned in June 1967. But recently, a private developer got his hands on several of the facilities and converted them into doomsday survival shelters. That's pretty intriguing, don't you think? Radio Transmission Park. In the Netherlands, Radio Kortwijk is a vast radio transmission park that's actually a classified one. These gigantic transmitters used to be online in 1918 and were used as the main mode of communication between the Dutch homeland and the Dutch East Indies, a colony which is presently a part of Indonesia. Most of the site was damaged because of the bombing raid which took place in World War II, but it was reconstructed and the operations were continued until 2004, where it was completely shut down. Since then, most of the buildings at the site have been demolished, but Building A, also known as the Sphinx or the Cathedral because of its grandiose design, has not been demolished. The building is considered to be a national monument, and although it is abandoned, it's sometimes used as a film set. You can see a glimpse of the structure during the making of the movie Mine Hunters in 2004. Home of Robin Hood. We've all grown up listening to the folklore of Robin Hood, where he robbed from the rich and gave it to the poor and needy. But the tale is not just confined to the pages of the book. Apparently, it's acclaimed that the home of Robin Hood stands tall at Sherwood Forest in Clipston, Nottinghamshire, England. But the forest isn't just the end of the story. There's also the abandoned Clipston Colliery headstocks, that is, 2 gigantic coal mine towers which can be seen from far, far away. History says these 200-foot-high towers were the main mining industry of the small village, but the coal mine is approaching almost 20 years of abandonment. Although the mine is closed, the towers have been given a Grade 2 listing by the UK government for its special historic significance. This means the giant headstocks cannot be torn down without giving a petition to the local authority. It's also been rumoured that the headstocks will be the centre of attraction for a new theme park, where a zip wire will be built between the towers. Now that's something to completely look forward to, isn't it? Viking Village. If you've seen the series called Vikings, or you've watched animated movies of it like How to Train Your Dragon and Brave, then you'll be in love with the vibe of Vikings. What if I told you there's an entire abandoned village of Vikings waiting to be explored? That is the absolute truth and no fiction. The Viking Village exists in Hoffen, Iceland, and the story goes that this village was built for a movie, but later on, unfortunately, the movie got cancelled, and now the place has become a tourist attraction. The place has managed to provide a stream of income to the farmer whose land was used to build it. Viking Village is so realistic that for a moment you'll actually believe that you travelled back in time and have arrived at the era of the Vikings. There are not just houses, but also an eerie-looking dungeon which is hidden beneath an artificial boulder. Although not many people visit the area, the place has a small Viking-themed cafe for the tourists. What do you think about this place? Did it make it onto your list of places to visit? Let us know in the comments below. Fukushima, Japan. If you're well versed with history, then you definitely must know about the nuclear disaster which took place in Fukushima, Japan in 2011. Not only was the power plant abandoned, but also the entire surrounding area. But since then, nature intensely took over the place, where foliage grew around immensely through the homes and facilities. The exclusion zone is said to be of 12 miles, where a lot of offices and homes stand empty. Thousands of cars have been stranded, never to be driven again. It's been opined that an approximate 160,000 people had to flee to save their lives when the disaster took place, and only 40,000 people were allowed to come back to claim their property. A lot of people agree that the place now looks exactly like a set from the popular TV show The Walking Dead. The radiation readings still are dangerously high, and it's likely to be this way for many more years. Well, this place only confirms one thing, that no matter how much you earn or how many assets you have, when a crisis hits you, all that matters is being with the people you love. Fern high-angle battery. If there is anything worth appreciating about wars fought a long time ago, it's the remnants of the building and weapons built during that time. One such structure can be seen in the United Kingdom on the Isle of Portland in Dorset, England. The Fern high-angle battery was constructed in 1892 and was built to protect the Portland harbour. Though it's been decommissioned since 1906, the site remains intact and became a monument in 1973. Due to the strategic placement of this battery, it was cleverly tucked away from enemy forces which came this way. Unfortunately, the gun battery only lasted 15 years after it was operational, since maritime warfare had progressed far too quickly to justify using this outdated facility. From 1918, the battery was used for storing field guns from France, and later in the 1960s, it was used for testing the capsules in which nuclear materials were transported. Though the battery's main purpose has long been abandoned, it still remains to this day a very popular tourist attraction. Miniature underwater city. Do you believe mermaids exist? Do you think they live in an underwater castle dreaming about the above world? Well, what was found in Cap d'Antibes in south of France was not an ancient mermaid castle, but apparently a miniature French town that has houses, church, an amphitheatre, and also a lawyer's office. Apparently, the underwater town was constructed between 1963 and 1965 by a French filmmaker that wanted to shoot a mermaid movie around it called L'Enfant et la Sirène. But it was abandoned since they considered making the movie into an animated one. Only a few people knew about the underwater city, but few divers discovered it back in 2007. Presently, you can actually take a visit to the city with the help of guiding tours for a nominal fee. The place is well worth seeing since the entire place is home to corals and fish. Would you dive in to greet your underwater neighbours? Let us know in the comments below. Thank you so much for watching, and if you enjoyed the video, please let me know by clicking the like button. Do share, write a comment, and don't forget to subscribe so that you can catch up my next video. And that's all of them. Is there any site from the list which you would love to explore? Let us know in the comments, and before you go, be sure to smash the like button, share and subscribe for more amazing content. See you again.